You call straight into the news. A lawyer Law.Baffour Awuah, a member of parliament for Mensha South, Eddie in Simbi Eddie Abetuja. Efa OSP Kissi Agyabeng Ofori Atta, a former financial minister, amongst say for Abetuja, just say yes, say during his reign, just say no matter etimi torchi, and for quem ama the city, yan din pa. Ama Kissi Ofori Atta ne lawyer etim da beto abontin say ne ho ayede emfa no enti te ne ho tona na say ne ho ne yi kakra tembiom pebia on betimi ayede etimi aye aba na we na amafo bebre na ayede beto abontin say OSP Kissi Agyabeng a former case wetimi aye a handle no sisi nipa kono kula eni mangan masia utimi eko bibi potianwo na ne na yede akotwetwe nkomo na de be so de tuyi bia na de atoye na ade ntina we die bebia Ken Ofori Atta bia wo no untimi ayede entomben ewo hono na emo peso o suspect on so de obeba abegina da kem na je say mayi na no we na amafo bebi na yede edi tuja say de o ye ndie enye fair inti onhwe bebi no ompa bebi ifa asemwe de emfa na Ken Ofori Atta no hotona bebi opinion bia no weba inti Ken Ofori Atta si amon ka say die o nyan si die inti atifo MP edi nsem bebi na yede atuja Mensha South MP or the nsem bebi na yede atuja inti meso se koji nsem twem na yede abesisia I ordinary TV meso so be subscribe like na be share video ni mo be bi ahwe yenko tie ba wambrasia me do bra so nya bre ahwe
I wouldn't be too concerned about the conduct of the lawyers of Ken Ofori Atta. I am on the side of the special prosecutor because the special prosecutor works for the state and it's fighting corruption. So I would be concerned about the way forward for the special prosecutor. The fundamental question in the circumstance then would be, should the approach be a press conference to lambast or declare Ken Ofori Atta wanted? I would take a cue from the OSP's own report in terms of how it handled the issue of the Airbus scandal, where it stated there at page 14 of the report, the first paragraph of page 14, the third paragraph of page 14, where it stated that when it became difficult to have Samuel Adam Mahama, the brother of the president, when it became difficult to have him for the purposes of interview, he flew out of Ghana, right, to go and interview him outside of Ghana. So on that score, there's a precedent by the OSP in terms of how it deals with persons outside of the country, right? And so in the circumstance, what should be the approach? I would rather want to see the OSP make progress. And so the approach for me then will not be a press conference. The approach will be to adopt the same approach they adopted in the case of President Mahama's brother, by writing to the lawyers to say that at this point it appears difficult for Ken Ofori Atta to come to the Republic of Ghana. And so what then is the way forward? We want to go and interview him outside of Ghana. Give us his location, because we have done it before. We can do it again. At the time it did it, it had a budget of 149 million cedis. This year, it has been given a budget of 149 million cedis. So within their same means, it should be possible for them to do it.
Now, but there's something different. Just a second. There's something different in this one, though, because the OSP tells us today that the real reason why they want him physically present is because they want to arrest him.
Okay. The fundamental question again would be, in the absence, whether or not in the absence of Ken Ofori Atta, they can make progress in terms of their case. When you look at Act 29, they don't need Ken Ofori Atta's arrest before proceeding against him. Act 30, when you look at Act 30, they don't need his presence before arresting him. In fact, my brother, if the presence of Ken Ofori Atta is necessary for determining a prima facie case in the whole investigations, then clearly the case of the OSP against Ken Ofori Atta is weak, because it would then seem that without Ken Ofori Atta making an input into the investigations, they cannot proceed. Don't forget, under the Constitution of the Republic of Ghana, Ken Ofori Atta has a right not to incriminate himself. So he has a right to remain silent. So what if you arrest him for the purposes of interview and he says he will not talk? Is it a case that then you cannot proceed because he decides to keep quiet? I think that the approach ought to vary. The approach ought to vary. Even if you want to arrest him, bait him. You see, there is a proverb in Chi. Say, right? So it seems that Ken and his lawyers have been detecting the pace. You are an investigative body. There are times when investigative bodies pretend to tag along and not show force, not show of authority necessarily. They can pretend to tag along. Before you realize, they've hanged you in a gallows. And that is why I think that the approach adopted by the OSP, for me, needs to be varied. Okay. It needs to be varied in the public interest for the purposes of getting us results.
He had been diagnosed with prostate cancer. He's scheduled to go for a surgery on the 13th of June. Mayo is in Minnesota. And because of that, and post-surgery on the 13th of June, he will need time to recover. And so that's why he can't come. OSP says, well, you didn't give me that document, so I formally don't have it. They've gone ahead to now declare him wanted formally. They have triggered the processes for Interpol to also issue the red notice. Legally, has the OSP checked all the boxes for you?
Thank you. I think my answer be yes. Legally, for the fact that the OSP is operating under the OSP Act, which is law enacted by Parliament, everything he has to, do must have support in law. So provided, the conditions are met. But Evans, my problem is, if my good friend Ken Ofori Atta is that much ill, and therefore, cannot be physically present, the lawyers must do the needful, at least, not to give a misleading impression that Ken is faking an illness, because there is a very, very sensational and screaming case, which is testing the endurance, of the Republic of Ghana in its fight against corruption. So merely putting out information on the internet that Ken, has been diagnosed with cancer, and therefore will not be able to, show up physically, I think we'll be begging the question, if indeed, genuinely, he is sick. The OSP's office is an institution, that is managed by a human being. And I think that the OSP, the special prosecutor himself, would wish to approach this matter with, a human face and human dignity. I don't think that the special prosecutor will, by all means, attempt to bring Ken Ofori Atta, to face the rigors of the law if he's sick. No one will do that. So I think perhaps the legal team is not approaching the matter in a way that will attract the sympathy of the nation. What they are rather doing, is sort of antagonizing the entire nation. They are infuriating people, they are provoking people. So if I were, in charge of the legal team, my advice to Ken would be, if you are sick, please produce, the document, because under the OSP law, there must be production of documents. After all, the law deals with evidence. So if there's hard evidence, no one can run away, from the pieces of evidence that will be made available.
Because at the end of the day, it's been over 30 years. And we should not get stuck in a cycle of retribution, there be a vindictiveness, that is not how countries are developed. So, and to me, as a patriot of our country, I believe in accountability. Yes, if any state officer or official has tinkered of the public treasury, he's got to face the consequences of his actions or inaction. So, and the other day, I'm not against that. But a choir offers virtually